Welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf forecast for Saturday, April 12th. Brought to you by Vunabaca, a new residential and surf-based community in Fiji. Check them out at vunabaca.com. First, we'll take a look at the significant wave height chart for the North Pacific. A small gale is off North Japan. 24-foot seas are being generated. Remnants of a previous gale in the same location off Japan have migrated to the western Gulf of Alaska but are producing no sea heights of interest. Little gradient off northern California producing 10-foot seas or so. And that is about it. It's getting to be late in the season, and swell production is definitely on the decrease in the North Pacific. Take a quick look at the jet stream. Upper level winds 30,000 feet and above. These winds direct or help fuel the development of storms at the ocean surface, and also direct the storm's path once they do form. As of right now, there's still a fairly healthy flow coming off of northern Japan. Winds 160 knots in one small top pocket. Bit of a trough here off of the Kuril Islands, but nothing remarkable. And then yet the jet tracks more or less flat east, falls into a small trough here in the western Gulf of Alaska, but it's kind of pinched off. And then the jet splits, with most energy going up into Alaska and a residual flow over Hawaii and into Southern California and northern Baja. The only area that looks even reasonably productive is right here. Just winds generally are weak, and there's just not enough energy to support gale development. We'll put this into motion, take a look and see what happens. Basically the same pattern holds for the next 48 hours. We're into Tuesday. Another little trough tries to get organized here off Japan. Wind levels are pretty meager, not enough to really support gale development. And then you have the split pattern still going on in the east. So we're out to Tuesday. We'll continue to put this in motion. You got this kind of almost a split thing going here, so that pretty much negates any development activity in this region. A little bit of a trough trying to push into the Gulf in late Wednesday. And that just rolls into Canada, and then we interestingly enough, we go into pretty much a zonal flow centered around 35 to 40 north, going flat west to east. Little bit of a trough tries to get going in the Gulf here late Saturday of next week, and another little trough off the northern Kuril Islands. But again, wind speeds are rather weak, and there's just really nothing here that stands out that suggests that gale development's going to occur. Quickly taking a look at the surface level charts. These are surface level winds, surface pressure, looking for low pressure, counterclockwise circulation. 35 knot winds here off of northern Japan. Little bit of a gale, nothing remarkable at all. High pressure north of Hawaii, 1024 millibars, basically setting up sort of a east-northeast trade wind flow over the islands. And then additional high pressure pushing into Canada, setting up this gradient off of northern California with lower pressure inland, tighter isobars and more winds, 30-knot winds. That's good for local northern wind swell, probably in the 8-9 second range, into central California, northern California. Put this into motion, see how it plays out. The low here off of Japan pretty much starts fading by into Sunday. Makes a little bit of a comeback there Sunday night. A little pocket of 40 knot winds for a second. High pressure starts moving towards the U.S. West Coast. And strong trades over the Hawaiian Islands. I'll put this into motion. This gale fades out. High pressure is the name of the game in the East Pacific. You should see this gradient fire up even more as we go into the next couple of days. This is on Monday night, Tuesday. A little bit of a low trying to get organized here way south off of Japan. Put this into motion. There's the gradient along California, 30 knot winds, wind swell, but it's all tucked up along the coast. Probably be a mess in terms of conditions. Trades continue. Hawaii, they back off a little bit. Low pressure in the Bering Sea. This is again Tuesday night, but nothing remarkable, and nothing with this low here either. Continue to put this into motion. This is interesting. This is new on the charts as of the 12Z run. A little bit of low trying to get organized over the date line. Will be interesting to see if this actually happens. And low pressure again up in the Gulf of Alaska while the gradient continues off of California. This is on Thursday. Put this into motion. There we go. The low dissipates going north of Hawaii. It's basically riding over top of high pressure here. A bit of a gradient going on between the high and the low. Southwest winds, maybe good for wind swell up into Canada. Continue to put that into motion. And then the low actually is theoretically supposed to wrap up 180 hours out. Seems hard to believe, but we'll watch it. Also another low off the northern Kurils and Kamchatka by Saturday night, a week out. Never believe anything the models say that far out. About 3 to 4 days is the normal event horizon that where the believability starts dropping off. Let's go take a look and see what's supposed to happen at the ocean surface. First up, the low again off of northern Japan, 24-foot seas. Put this into motion. That holds and pushes southwest. Good for Hawaii. Swell probably down the 308 or 9 degree path later in the week. Given those sea heights and the winds, probably like some 14, maybe 15 second period swell. Anyway, we'll put that into motion. See how this plays out. It actually bumps up there, 26-foot seas on the 319 degree path. But again, this is a very small system. It's good for small swell for Hawaii. Given how far away it is from the U.S. West Coast, probably next to nothing will result. And that's the end of that. It fades. Here's seas associated with the gradient off of California. We're looking at in the 14, 15 foot range, 8 or 9 second period wind swell, maybe a little bit more. But probably a mess. And we keep going, and now we're already into Friday and beyond, and really nothing going on. A little bit of a low theoretically for the Gulf. But that's kind of it. North Pacific winding down. It's about right for the season. That's not to say we couldn't have another pulse or two. But once you get pretty well into April, things start backing off, unless it's the spring after El Nino, and then you could see much more amplification of storm systems. But that's not the case this year. Next, we'll take a quick look at the southern hemisphere. A week ago, Sunday, a small low developed gale on the southern edge of the South California swell window. 32-foot seas, up to 36-foot seas. The cutoff was right around here. The reality is most of this energy was aimed at Chile and not so much at the U.S. West Coast. Here's the Great Circle Pass into Peru, and if you notice the track of the storm, it was pushing right up those paths. So that's the preferred target. But Southern California, we'll sort of roll this back here, had some sideband energy. I mean, most of this was cutting across the pass rather than pushing up to Southern California. But still, some small swells expected into Southern California for the early to mid part of the week. Nice little early season tease. And then what's even more interesting as we roll out in time and get more current, and here we go, as of Saturday morning, another system was forming in almost the exact same area. Now this one's a little bit more interesting in that it pushes north. See that? So that's happening pretty much right now. And here's the Southern California Great Circle tracks. We're talking about 184 degrees or so, pushing right up the paths there. So that means probably a better pulse of small swell for Southern California long term. And also all the way down into Mexico, Costa Rica. This area should fare pretty well from this system. It's in development. It'll be all but gone by Saturday night. There you go. Now after that, there's pretty much nothing going on. You look for mostly 30-foot seas in this region. That'll get you a 17-second period swell, and that's about what it takes to make the 5,500 nautical mile journey up here, or 6,500 if you're coming from this direction here. So, and basically there's just nothing that's even close for the next week. A bit of something trying to get going 180 hours out if one is to believe the models, but we're not going to believe that at this point in time. So basically, one little pulse on the way for Southern California, a second also as well, maybe even up into Northern California and down into the tropics as well. So the Southern Hemi, as one would expect, is trying to come online a little bit at a time. Next, let's take a look at the long-term projection. As usual, take a look at the Southern Oscillation Index, the difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. Negative numbers. A negative relationship suggests the active phase of the MJO, which can enhance storm production winter months in the North Pacific. Positive numbers are the active phase of the MJO, or represent the active phase of the MJO. Tends to suppress storm production, suggests high pressure in the Pacific, and also is an indicator of La Nina. Prolonged negative numbers for months on end are a sign of El Nino. At this point in time, we've come just off a long run of negative numbers for the better part of 3 months, all suggestive of the active phase of the MJO in the West Pacific, but now we are in the inactive phase, and clearly the numbers have spiked up. 29 is not a good sign. The average, as you can see, was down. 30-day running average was down around 13. Now it's up to minus 4.8, and the 90-day average all this time has been hovering around 0. So no suggestions of El Nino in the atmosphere at all, though there are things going on in the ocean that would have one believe otherwise. A quick look, here's the same data, 30-day running average of the SOI, and here is the long run from January into March. Negative numbers, bottomed out about minus 13 or so. Now it's back on the increase. So this is like a long-running active phase of the MJO. Now we're going towards the inactive phase. This is not unexpected. The models had suggested it. The question is, how long and how far will it go? How inactive will it get? Will the 30-day average move back up into the 0 range, or will it start make a turn and start heading negative again? Historical average, here's 2 years with the numbers. Clearly we're as low or a little bit lower than we were in a good run that we had back in the summer of 2012. But prior to that, it was the big not the big El Nino, but a modest El Nino of 2009-2010. So we're trying to make some progress. Certainly this is way better than we've been for the past 3 years in a kind of weak La Nina phase, so this is good news. Next we'll take a look at deviations from winds, deviations from normal. That is direction of the wind, and specifically what we're interested in is just a very small range, pretty much from 3 degrees north to 3 degrees south of the equator. West wind anomalies are, here's Australia, maritime continent. West anomalies are in play again in the far west Pacific. This is good news. Pretty much going from as far west as you can get in the Pacific, almost reaching to the dateline, but not quite. This is good. Westerly anomalies help produce Kelvin waves. This situation actually never stopped. There was always some form of westerly anomalies in the West Pacific after the big westerly wind bursts of January, February, and March, and here we are almost into mid-April, and still we have another westerly wind burst, a weaker one, but a westerly wind burst occurring just the same. This is good news and right in time. This suggests more warm water will be transported to depth and make its way across the Pacific Ocean to support the existing Kelvin wave that is working its way east. We'll get into that in a minute. Looking further east, here's Hawaii. Weak east anomalies on the east side of the dateline. Nothing particularly strong, but just the same. Weak east anomalies. This is the way it's been pretty much all this year so far. Next, we take a look a week out, 180-hour forecast. Same region, Australia. Weak west anomalies continuing, only making it to about 160 east or so, with even weaker anomalies to about the dateline. And then what is kind of interesting, though, is there are mild west anomalies that are supposed to make it almost the whole way across the Pacific to the Galapagos. So this is good. This all suggests the active phase of the MJO is returning and is supposed to hold for at least a week. That's good news. Here's another depiction of the same scenario. This is a forecast 2 weeks out, outgoing long wave radiation, less reflectivity, which is indicated by the blues, suggests more clouds, which suggests the active phase of the MJO. The yellows and oranges are more reflectivity off the ocean surface, suggestive of high pressure and easterly anomalies and the inactive phase of the MJO. So basically what we see is the active phase of the MJO working its way across the maritime continent per the statistical model here and continuing east, making it almost to the dateline 2 weeks out. That is the preferred scenario. That suggests westerly anomalies. That suggests more warm water transport, and more fuel for the Kelvin wave, which ultimately could at some point result in the beginning building blocks of El Nino. The dynamic model is a little less aggressive. It suggests the active phase is to last for about a week and then basically die out. But the good news is, even in this worst case scenario, no sign of the inactive phase, just a dead neutral pattern, which would be perfectly acceptable. The upper level model depicts pretty much the same picture. Active phase of the MJO pretty strong. When you get the whites in here, that tends to be, that's the low end of the scale. The greens here are enhanced precipitation, or at least the capabilities support enhanced precipitation at the jet stream level. So here's our active phase of the MJO. It's forecast going through about the end of April 27th, maybe the 30th or so. So that's about 2 weeks out, followed by the inactive phase of the MJO, suppressed convection, and that starts about the end of April and is supposed to work its way east through maybe the second week in May, followed yet by another active phase of the MJO starting early May and going basically a whole way through the month of May. So this looks like a fairly normal pattern as of right here. The thing is, the models seem to have a bit of a hard time picking up on the westerly anomalies and the westerly wind bursts, and they more react to it once it happens rather than actually predict it. They predict the general trend, but not the fine details. And then here's sort of a historical 1 month view of what's been going on. The reds and the purples are westerly anomalies. Oh, and here's the scale. Far west Pacific here, far east Pacific here, dateline here. So here's what happened in March. Notice that westerly anomalies continued through March. This is actually a small westerly wind burst here. Kind of tried to die off in early April as the inactive phase got going, but here you go. Come about the 7th of April, we were back into westerly anomalies. A weak westerly wind burst is in play right now. Nothing strong, nothing huge, but again, that's it's enough to transport warm water east, which is what we're looking for. And per this modeled view, it's supposed to continue out through about the 19th of April, maybe more. So a continued presence of westerly winds in the West Pacific expected through at least the middle of April, and that has been the case since January 1. All this is good news. Next, what's the effect of these winds on the ocean surface in regards to water temperatures? This is sea surface temperature anomalies, deviations from norm for this time of year at all these various locations. We have been watching this little cold eddy working its way to the Galapagos. It has made no progress. If anything, it's dying. That's good news. The primary area we're concerned with is what they call the Nino 3.4 region. A couple degrees either side of the equator from about 120 to 170. Notice there is warmer than normal waters in that entire region, anywhere from half a degree to maybe up to a degree above normal. This would almost suggest El Nino, but it's not strong enough, and it hasn't been this way long enough to really mean anything at this point in time. But it's a step in the right direction. There has been cool waters here for months. That's all gone now. We're kind of in a neutral pattern, tending warm. But notice, just south of the equator, there's this large pocket of cooler water and winds pushing off of Chile. This has been the case for a while now, but the expectation is that the warm water pattern here will build over time. Again, warm water between Japan Northern California. This has been in place for 6 months or more now. All warm water. Notice basically the entire northern hemisphere in the Pacific is full of warmer than normal water. So that bodes well both for tropical storm development here and here, but also for perhaps the formation of El Nino in the months ahead. In fact, this is the only cool pool that's really present anywhere. We were also looking for any signs of a cool pool developing off Africa. Sometimes that'll happen and suggest the development of a easterly wind burst, but none of that is indicated. So we're pretty much in a pretty good place right now for the coming fall and winter. Here's another view of surface level winds. Notice the relatively modest westerly anomalies in the far west Pacific. This is the west, this is the east Pacific, and this is the equator. Notice just a couple degrees either way. And water temperatures half a degree above normal here. Other sources say it's more than that, but that's close enough. It gives you a good idea what's going on. Notice there's actual westerly winds. So this is the anomalies. This is actuals. True easterly winds here, but notice there's actually a couple of arrows suggesting pure west winds, not just a relaxation of trades, but an actual reversal of trades in the far west Pacific. So that's kind of what we're looking for. And finally, the latest data from the Jason 2 satellite, sea height anomalies. This is the height of the ocean surface anomalies, difference from norms, and notice there's this large area of sea height that is 5 to 10 centimeters above normal, with one pocket 15 centimeters above normal, which isn't much, in terms of if you're just thinking of 15 centimeters, but in reality this suggests a large pocket of warm water at depth underneath this area. Warm water expands, pushes surface waters upwards, so you get this bulge, and that's what you see going on here. You see the same thing as well here, warm water, maybe not necessarily at depth, but at the surface. The net result is still warm water where the yellows are, and that's what we're seeing. Next, the really interesting chart, Kelvin wave activity. This is subsurface water temperature, deviations from norm on the bottom chart. The top chart is the actual water temperatures. What you normally see is you see a big pool of warm water here, and then you see the temperature, this gradient, the isotherm, really push north, and so there's a big step here. Notice that is starting to disappear, and if anything, the isotherm is starting to flatten out here. That suggests that warm water is migrating east, and in fact this anomaly chart clearly shows that. 4.5, almost pushing 5 degree above normal water temperature here at 150 west, south of Hawaii on the equator, and there shows a gap here and then a pocket of 5+ degree warm water pushing. This right here is about the Galapagos Islands. The reality is there's no sensors. These Alexas are the sensors running down the chains of the tow array buoys on the equator. The sensors on buoys that are here are all down, so there's no data. So this is sort of a modeled view. It's showing a break, but the suspicion is this is a continuous stream of warm water going from basically the date line up into the Galapagos Island, and that's exactly what the Jason 2 satellite showed in the sea height anomalies. And we have another view of this we'll look at in a minute. But clearly, this is what you call a Kelvin wave: warm water way above normal, generated by west winds blowing on the ocean surface for 3 months, January, February, and March, pushes warm water to depth about 150 meters, and that warm water traverses the entire width of the Pacific and then eventually hits the Galapagos Island plateau, forcing the water up to the surface. And then with that, you can see the signature of El Nino, which is typically warm water streaming off the Galapagos Islands, being driven by trades back to the west. The warmer the water, the more it affects the atmosphere. The more it affects the atmosphere, the more it imparts energy to the jet stream, which then starts fueling storm development in the northern hemisphere in the winter. It also fuels tropical development in this region in the summer, and in the West Pacific in the fall. Here's another version, same image at depth. Notice cool water now in the West Pacific, warm water. Here's the date line basically. Warm water dropping, downwelling downwelling into the ocean, traversing across the Pacific. I mean, there's just a huge stream here. This model actually is showing 6 degrees above normal, but remember, there's no buoys here, so this is just a model view, so it's really unknown how warm it is. But over in this region, it's at least 5+ degrees above normal. The Galapagos would be right about here. Notice there's a little pocket of cool water right here as of the 8th. And once that's squeezed out, then the belief is that all this water is going to start gurgling up on the surface, and a large warm plume will develop off the Galapagos, eventually affecting the atmosphere, and then set the El Nino machine into play. Now, the question is, one Kelvin wave does not make an El Nino. It takes multiple Kelvin waves. It takes a continued flow of warm water going through this pipeline and gurgling up off the Galapagos. So what we need is more west winds in the West Pacific. But what happens is, as warm water starts hitting the surface here, it'll start warming the atmosphere, and it sort of sets up a feedback loop. So then basically the pump starts going, and you just get that continued flow. We're sort of on the precipice right here, kind of a critical point. Once we get through the spring unpredictability barrier, strange things can happen in spring. The models don't have a good handle on it, and things, it's hard to predict what's going to happen. But once we get into June, July, I think this pattern, if it's going to become entrenched, will become real obvious, and there'll be less uncertainty. So to quickly wrap this up, looks like storm production in the North Pacific is fading. The South Pacific is trying to come online, a couple of weak little pulses coming. In the meantime, the El Nino, ENSO, MJO machine, it continues to be productive. Warm water poised to gurgle up off the Galapagos, looking to see if it manifests itself at the surface in the next couple of weeks. That will be that's something that we're anxiously awaiting. So thank you for watching, and we'll be doing this same time, same place next week. And many thanks to Vunabaka.com, the residential community in Fiji. Take a look at their website, Vunabaka.com. Thank you.